Hello and welcome to the DEI is podcast. This is what could have been our very first episode, but I'm so glad that it's happening today. We're here with two of DiVerity PPC's advisors, Cornell Verdeja-Woodson, founder and CEO of Brave Trainings LLC, and Tara Robertson, principal of Tara Robertson Consulting Inc., and one of LinkedIn's top voices of 2022. Brave Trainings offers many workshops focused on topics such as allyship and building a culture of belonging in the workplace, a train the trainers program, and of course, strategic planning through executive coaching and consulting. Back again for the second time is Tara Robertson, principal of Tara Robertson Consulting, which provides assessment, strategy, implementation, speaking, and coaching for all of your DEI efforts. So how are you both? I'm just so glad that we're finally able to do this.
I'm loving it. I'm very happy and excited to be here.
Me too. And I figure today is the day that this conversation was supposed to happen. So
Exactly.
all the people who are here are the right people. We are the right people, and wherever the conversation goes is the right place.
That's right. That's right.
So I know this conversation has been a long time coming, and it's been a while since we started thinking about this idea of accountability. So I'm just really curious to dive in. One of the things that I've been dying to ask you both is, how often do you encounter clients who you ultimately find out are treating DEI efforts as like checkbox exercises? So they're going through the motions, they know that other people are doing it, but ultimately they're not really doing what we would consider to be the work.
Tara, you want to go first?
Okay. I think as I'm just a one-person consulting shop, so I have to be really discerning about who I choose to partner with. I want to make the biggest impact I can in the world, and I want to have a successful business. So I become more discerning about who I partner with as my business matures. And some of the questions that I'm asking at the very beginning that I didn't ask at the start were like, who on the executive team is championing this? And what's your budget? So those two things are really telling for me. If there's no one on the executive team, I usually direct those people to go back internally in their company and figure out who's going to champion this work at the top table. And if the budget is way out of whack, like if someone has a budget of $3,000 and wants a full assessment and strategy, like that tells me that they don't know what kind of work needs to happen, or that they view that the work as being like really quick, and that's not really what the work is for me. So I'm curious, what about you, Cornell?
It's exactly the same thing. And I actually really enjoy working with those types of clients because I see an opportunity to move them from here to there. And so a lot of times I'll run into clients who, same thing, very small budget, there isn't any executive there, and you can tell that it's very much like we just need to do something. I have had more people come to me at the end of the year and say, oh, we just need to get a workshop in. And I go, ugh. So I don't do one-off workshops. It needs to be sort of like, we need to have a relationship, right? Because you're not going to learn anything from one time. So in that consulting conversation, if they're willing and open to kind of be malleable to that, that's usually where I go, okay, we can work together. But if they're like, nope, this is where I'm staying, then I'm like, then I'm not the person for you, right? There's another consultant out there who's willing to do that. It's not me. And I ask very similar questions. Budget, what are the attitudes of the company? In terms of, are the employees generally like, yeah, we need to do this, but just need some education? Because that can also be exhausting on us as consultants, dealing with people who are just so starkly against it that, not being internal and doing the day-to-day work with them can be hard. So I do tend to take on more of the more difficult ones because I love that challenge of being able to get them to go from here to there. But I would say most of my clients are on the checkboxy stage, unfortunately.
Oh, I have two things to add. The people who often are reaching out, who aren't at the executive table, they are super passionate. They're often younger. So there's a bit of a coaching opportunity for me there. And I want to support their passion. I want to support their hunger for justice in the workplace. So sometimes it's asking them coaching questions to get clear on how they can take the next step internally.
That's right.
The other question I ask is, why now? What do you want to do this thing? tell me why right now in your organization.
Yes.
And that helps me tease out and get at like kind of the backstory and like what are the conditions right now in that organization where this is becoming urgent or it's something that they're going to dedicate time and money to doing.
That is, I totally forgot about that question. That's such a good one because they don't often lead with something happens or,
Right.
you know, so, and usually because they're embarrassed by it, right? They don't want us to come in and think negatively about them up front. I go, I need to know that kind of stuff. And so by asking that question, you're getting that like, oh yeah, well, someone said this or we had this issue or, and like, okay. And then it also leads you to determine, you may think you needed this, but you actually need this. Right, given what I'm hearing, and so we're able to really be, you know, good coaches and consultants and provide them what they need and not what they think they want.
So I'd just like to collect back some of what I've been hearing you both say. So in terms of the right now question, that's a really diagnostic question, or it can be. And so it adds a lot of context, I think I hear you both saying. And that's often something that clients are not necessarily forthcoming about because maybe they're embarrassed, maybe they want to maintain their reputation. But it's absolutely essential for us to understand what we're walking into if you really want us to help you out. So organizations, if you're out there watching this, please don't get freaked out by the why now question. Maybe come prepared with one.
Yeah.
I'd like to pivot to our audience real quick to try to engage them a little bit. So in your experience, what would be a clear indicator that an organization's DEI efforts are mostly lip service or checking off the boxes? So I'll leave that up for a little bit as the responses come in. If we're moving into our main topic for the day, like we know that in recent years, there's been this explosion in demand for DEI consultants, especially after George Floyd. But even with that increased visibility, you know, in the national discourse or like even global discourse, really on race and racism, race is still a really, really uncomfortable topic for so many people. But if we get stuck in that discomfort, how can organizations get past that kind of checkboxy kind of going through the motions thing? Or like, why is it that people get so stuck on race from your view?
Do we have a full hour, 2 hours, 2 days? Like,
I wish we could do a part two.
So for me, and this comes up something that I think we were talking about backstage before we went live, is this shame and guilt that I, at least from my experience, that I've seen a lot of people who get really emotionally charged around the conversation of race, and particularly white folks who get really wrapped up because I think there is this feeling that we're blaming them for everything that is and has happened, as opposed to helping them understand the role that they may play unconsciously in the perpetuation of racism. And then there's that conversation around their truth is how they see the world through their own lens. And they're like, I don't see what you're talking about, or I don't understand. And they're not open to the idea of multiple truths existing, that because you see what you see or don't see what you see, doesn't mean that there isn't more happening out there. And because of your identity as a white person, you're not going to see what my experience is as a Black person. But your willingness to be open to multiple truths existing at once could lead you to kind of see those little nuanced differences of how the check person, the cashier person at the grocery store responds to you differently than how they respond to me, right? But I think they have to be open to that. And I think a part of that is shame and guilt. Well, I can't fix it. I can't do anything about it. So if I ignore it, then I can just keep living my life as I have been. And I think we're realizing that that doesn't work. So, I mean, I'm sure there's much, much more to that, but I think that's been some of the things that I've heard from many people and that I've discerned from my conversations with folks.
I'm just thinking, like, when George Floyd was murdered, there was this huge, like, especially with white people, like interest and genuine interest in wanting to learn and see a different perspective and change things, because it's like, which was really, really exciting. I'm hearing myself use the past tense because I think that excitement has come and it's waning. And also, as we go into an economic recession, as this global pandemic just doesn't end and keeps grinding on,
Right.
people are really freaking tired.
Yeah.
And um it takes some muscle, and it takes some stamina, and it takes some like, oh, to be in this for the long term, and to not only be able to see systemic racism in education, in the media, in government programs, in how our cities are organized, what it looks like in the workplace. Like, it takes a lot of time and a lot of personal discomfort to really witness and really see those things. And then there's like, I think, an internal process, like it's super uncomfortable. And I've coached people who are like, I didn't ask to be white. Like this so-called like I didn't, there's nothing that I did wrong, and that guilt and shame again. So moving through that, and understanding your internal landscape, and then kind of building that muscle to move through it, and then be mindful about like how you want to be in the world, and then what you want to do, especially when you're a leader. Like, it's not easy. Like, if this stuff were easy, it would have been done, and it really isn't.
Yeah.
So it's requiring people to build new muscles, and it's hard.
And I understood that more profoundly through my own experience as a cisgendered man, right? And learning about my male privilege. It was hard. I was upset when women in my life were saying, hey, your male privilege is really impacting this experience for us, and how you show up in a space. And I was like, what? I'm Black and gay. I don't have male, like, and so coming through that discomfort of having to kind of understand and unpack my cisgender male privilege, I was like, whoa, this is what that feels like. Because I had only ever lived through my Blackness and my gayness and my brokenness when I was growing up, right? So I only understood marginalization. So having to come into understanding of this other part of me was really, really difficult, and it took me some time. So I think I've developed a little bit more empathy for the process, but yet knowing that we have to challenge people to go through it, though.
Yeah. I mean, those are wonderful points. Like, yeah, the backdrop of so much of what we're doing is a time of extreme uncertainty and stress. And that's cumulative, right? It builds up over time. We also don't end up talking very much about how white people are vulnerable, right? And so there are lots of white people out there trying to do the work, but guess what? There's still easy targets for people who haven't done their own learning, their own transformation, often people of color, to beat up on white people. Like, they are vulnerable to that, and that does take a toll. It doesn't matter if they are the dominant culture or the dominant group, there is an effect, right? And that's not to let white people off the hook or anything, but just to recognize that if we want to, as you were saying, Cornell, moving people from here to there, then we've got to understand where there is at either end and figure out those steps. I do want to pivot now to some comments that are coming in. Quentin's got a few things on their mind. So hiring one DEI person and thinking that means they are done. I've seen that a lot. Check. Focusing only on diverse hiring and thinking that's the whole journey. That's another check. Yeah.
Check.
Having no concept of psychological safety. Oh, big one, Quentin. Thank you so much, especially at the management leader level.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm not quite sure how to say this name. It might be Deidra. But thank you for commenting, wanting the consultant to write a prescription to heal the cultural infection. I got to write that down. That is wonderful phrasing.
That's
Thank
poetic
you.
and powerful.
I literally
great.
had to put that in my intro meeting with a client of like, just so you know, this isn't fixing everything, because it was coming up so much where people were like, well, you didn't fix anything. Yeah, I didn't create it either. It takes years. And yes.
Let's see. Roxanne says, absolutely. Even expressing / explicitly indicating preference to focus on, quote, culture and not willing to discuss, quote, race. Quentin back again, centering white priorities, watering down the concerns / questions / priorities of BIPOC staff, underrepresentation of minorities in leadership positions, expecting people to leave their lived experiences at the door rather than making making room for authenticity and whole person reactions to life. Quentin, I love that last phrase, whole person reactions to life.
Mhm.
I'm going to borrow it with permission.
There's so much
Uh,
wisdom in this community. Like,
I know.
I
Yes.
love this.
Yeah, that Roxanne's jumping in too. I've noticed when racism comes up, often it is met with counter arguments. Yeah, and that's exhausting. Or shifting away from racism towards issues of classism, specifically denying race issues to shifting conversations focused to class issue. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for all those responses, everyone. That was really, really rich.
Or white queer people saying, I'm not racist, I'm gay, or I'm a lesbian, or I'm queer. And it's like,
Both and.
yes, I am.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like some people have this mental construct of like, okay, this is a human being and they have this much capacity for isms. So my isms are going to be A, B, and C. Therefore, I can't be X, Y, and Z. It's like
Right.
that is not how that works. It's
Right,
not like
right.
an air filter you can just pop out and replace or something.
That's right.
So, often as DEI consultants, we find ourselves in the role of accountability partners for our clients, to try to get them out of that kind of checkboxy thing. But that said, accountability is a really hard one. So on the one hand, we're being paid to advise, educate, train, and to some degree to fulfill the wishes of our clients. But in your view, what can we be doing as consultants to support our clients in being more accountable for the progress that they make on their DEI journeys or lack thereof?
Tara, you want to go first?
Yeah, like I'm just thinking about the last client that I worked with, the Carpentries, which is a global like nonprofit that works to help researchers level up on coding and data science skills. And the toolkit that we put together at the end, there was like what I was hearing from a bunch of people in the community. They're like, we care about this, just tell us the things to do, like give us the tactical things. And it was like, yeah, there are some tactical things, but like for a global community that operates like in community spaces and university spaces and like sometimes in corporate spaces, like there is no one size fits all checklist. So we divided things up into kind of mindset and then some tactical things. So like kind of self-reflection questions that people could ask themselves, like, how am I doing and how is my mindset shifting? And how can I like implement some of these tactical things? And I think that needs to happen in corporations too. Like, how do we shift our mindset over time around what we consider equity and equitable work? And I'm seeing that from companies looking just at their people function, like their employee experience, to thinking about how are we designing products equitably? How are we investing in doing our corporate banking equitably? How are we marketing in the world, like across the whole company? So like that mindset shift for me is like how companies are kind of maturing their view and their mindset on DEI. And then I think for the tactical things, if your company has OKRs where you set measurable goals, the best practice is for your DEI goals to be part of the company's measurable business goals. This is a business imperative. It's not a nice to have like thing that people do on the side. So if you're serious about this, ladder that into the existing accountability like frameworks that you have. Who on the executive team is owning each one of these? What happens if they hit it? What happens if they miss it? Like when we miss product deadlines or when we miss the mark on product, we do retros and understand why we miss them. And then there's ownership on how we're going to do things differently. So I think we already have really strong metrics and kind of infrastructure on how we move the needle on lots of business things. We just need to expand that to include DEI there. What do you think, Cornell?
I literally have nothing else to add.
I don't believe that. You always have something good to say.
I'm dead serious. Everything you, as you were talking, I was like, yup, I was going to say that. I was going to say that. I was going to say that. I was going to say that.
Well, you're getting affirmation from the client, from the comments as well, from Christina Smith. And Christina was also weighing in with clients often don't get this is the work of the heart. It's not like building a widget. which I think is true, but is not incompatible with what you're saying, Tara. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah. So even in building widgets, it's hard work, you know?
That's right. That's right. That's right. The only thing I think I would add in my personal experience, I think, is around it was around Christina's comment around this is hard work, and I think getting leaders to understand, like I feel like everybody comes into the conversation from a different door, right? And not unfortunately, but yeah, unfortunately, some people come into the conversation through a business mindset, right? How does this impact the business? And so understanding for me where their head is critical to building the accountability that I'm trying to get them to understand, right? So like if you're a business centered person, then I'm trying to help you understand how this impacts the business, whether you do it or you don't, right? And so that's how I begin to build a conversation, which turns into hard work for folks, right? Because now I'm in it, I'm like, oh wow, I'm seeing how it impacts people, and it turns into I'm doing this because it matters, right? And also helps the business. But sometimes that door that people come through isn't always through the heart, it's through the business mindset. And so I think we have to get people where they are. So talking about that journey of where are they now to where we want to get them to, we got to own where they are. And I think we've been spending a lot of time fighting the business case, which I understand. But the reality of it is people are there. And if I want to build that accountability, and I want to talk about a little bit about like sort of even what accountability means, because the research, the literature on accountability doesn't even necessarily reference an actual change or mindset shift. But however, it does reference a answerability to something, right? So like, so you may not change your mindset on why diverse hiring, or I hate that term, diverse hiring, on building diverse workforce is important, but you're being held answerable to it. So not doing it means there is an action that gets taken, whether you lose something or you're forced to do something, right? So I think we have to be mindful too of what does accountability actually mean? Because it doesn't always look like the person actually changing their hearts and minds as well.
That is a fascinating point, and I would love to learn so much more about that.
I love studying accountability. It's a part of my research right now, so I'm really enjoying it.
By the way, everybody, Cornell is working his way towards earning a PhD, so let's all wish him the best of luck. It sounds like he's got a great handle on it. So to pivot to our audience quickly, when you're feeling frustrated or discouraged while trying to support clients and being accountable to their DEI work, how do you deal with it? So we'll let some comments come in. Some others have come in as well. So we've got, I think it's Asia Monroe. I have a question for the panelists. Has there ever been a time that being personally triggered or offended has nearly jeopardized your ability to work with clients?
100%. Now, for me, it depends on, like, people make mistakes, right? And they make well-intentioned mistakes that can also offend and trigger, right? And so for me, it's also about understanding, like, was that a mistake, or are you being outright ignorant? And I've had clients who are just outright ignorant, and are intending to like be a barrier in the process. And even then, I'm like, let's have a conversation. And if you're open to the dialogue, then we can continue working together. But if you're going to be stagnant and dig your feet into the sand, then I get to choose who I work with, and I can walk away from this conversation and this relationship. But if there's an openness to learning, and if there's like, okay, I can tell you just didn't know the right language, or you didn't understand something, and we can teach. But if you're open, we can move forward. If you're not, then we got to walk away from each other.
And this speaks to me as well for doing our own work. Like, I had a client last year. So much of the engagement was really, really great. And they were a dream client in many ways. And one of the leaders' communication styles triggered the heck out of me. And then I needed to look at myself and to reflect in therapy, like, where are my boundaries? How am I setting them? And how is my behavior backing that up? So that for me resulted in me being a little more mindful in the morning about how I started my day, and meant taking my work email off my phone, so that when I was waking up, I wasn't like, 3 a.m. email from my client, like, so getting more grounded and in my power and doing my work to heal some of my triggers and being patient with myself on those days. And yeah, it was tricky. If I were to go back, like, I think I over rotated on delivering really good work for that client. And I would have, if I could go back in a time machine, I think I would have been a bit more transparent about the impact that this was having on me and been a lot more compassionate with myself. Like, this is really tricky work. Like, it's not like any other consulting work. It's not like any other change management work. I think the reasons why it can be so deeply rewarding and fulfilling can also be some of the same reasons why it can be like lead to burnout, lead to like self-doubt. Am I doing a good job? Like, it's hard. So I think being really clear about your why, being clear about your boundaries and your behaviors that you're enacting in your own practice is really, really key.
That's right.
And I say this like I've got it figured out. Like, I don't. It's a work in progress.
I had a global client last year where I worked with several people who were on the executive team, but they had this one person who you just knew that they didn't really think we needed to be doing. In fact, they articulated that they didn't think we needed to be doing this work. And so in my mind, I'm like, why do you keep showing up? But they showed up every time just to go, yeah, but. And that upset me so much. But I think understanding sort of what was happening and why I was being triggered and why I was upset, allowed me to come back into that conversation in a very different way. And I think by the time we were kind of done, while I don't think he was fully like, yes, DEI is amazing, I do think there were some wins that I had gotten through to him that I think got him a little bit closer to sort of understanding the why behind this work.
So yeah, there's a lot in there, of course, and thank you for those responses. Thank you so much for the question. We've got some more action here in the chat. You two got everybody talking, it seems. So this participant, Deidre, I believe, is saying everyone is not coachable. Following that up by, you have to decide sometimes with a coach how much of yourself you are willing to give.
That's right.
And Quentin following up again with Deidre, welcome. I'd add, not everyone is coachable in their current state of mind. And that is emphasized because I think if people put in the work, they can all become coachable.
Right. But you have to be willing. Right. Like, you have to come to the table with a willingness, right, to learn and be open. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Definitely. And it is work. It is work. It is hard work. It's a grind sometimes, but it's deeply necessary, I think. And the fact that there are so many people coming out of the woodwork from many different fields and backgrounds to engage in this work, I think is a real indicator of how necessary we're all feeling that it is. Well, not all of us, but many of us, I should say.
Ooh, can I just jump in one sec? If
Please.
I were to go back to myself, the coaching question that I would ask this client is, where else in your work or life do you hire an expert and not listen to their expert advice?
All the time.
Oh, I've asked that question before.
And then the other question I'd ask is, what's going on for you?
Yeah.
But in that moment, I didn't have my feet grounded, and I was, oh, I'm not good enough. There's a deficit here. They want this and that. And it's like, no. Like, you've hired me as the expert. Where else are you hiring expert help and disregarding their advice?
Yeah.
Do you do that with your auditor?
No, you do not.
Do you do that with your general counsel? Okay, so curious, what's going on for you here on this topic?
And that can be so hard sometimes when we're dealing with a difficult client in this particular space, because I think, at least for me, I'll speak in I statements, I usually jump to the assumption that, oh, you're trying to, like, you don't believe in this work, or you're, all the negative mindset, right? But asking that feeling question, I have found in the last 5 years, is so profound to getting through some of the crap, right? How are you feeling coming into this conversation? And then you start going, well, I'm nervous. I am afraid because in the past I've been pointed at as the problem. or right, like, and you go, oh, okay. And
I'm
now
getting goosebumps, Cornell.
Right, because now we can start going, okay. And so I start leading conversations with that what this is not about, right? And then I start throwing myself under the bus. I too have to oftentimes go to my colleagues who in this working and check myself. And then you start seeing the shoulders drop, right? And they're like, oh, okay. And a sense of safety has been developed in the first meeting because they're going, okay, this is going to be a different experience. What I do tell people is, though, I am not, while my intent is not to harm or to make you uncomfortable, I can't say that uncomfortableness is not a part of the journey, right? And that I will provide a balance of challenge and support here, right? Because it is uncomfortable seeing the world this way, and then all of a sudden you go, whoa, I didn't know all the rest of that was there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And sometimes people hear psychological safety and really expect to be coddled and like shielded or sheltered. But really what we're talking about is psychological safety, like where you're safe enough,
I
right?
talk about brave spaces, right? Because I think safe spaces has oftentimes been turned into like, no, you're not going to disagree with me. We're not going to have tough, conflict and things. No. This work is all about all that complexity. So brave spaces for me is brave enough to lean into the discomfort that you're feeling and digest it a little bit more, to understand that we can have different viewpoints, but respect, right, and basic rights are super critical. But brave spaces are and tends to be a little bit more digestible for people to know what to expect.
Yeah, definitely. Setting expectations is so important. So I know that we're going a little bit over, and thank you so much for being able to stay. The last question that's been on my mind is, thinking about what we as consultants can do better to get our clients past DEI as a checkbox exercise, but also thinking about, again, accountability. So what can DEI consultants, like in general, be doing better to support accountability for the DEI field on the whole?
For the client or for us as consultants?
For us, so often the client, they don't really know very much about DEI, and so sometimes they don't even know what to look for. And if we're being real for a minute, there are people out there who are selling things that really are not helping us to advance racial equity. They're just out there to make a buck, and they're hurting literally everybody in the process.
Yeah. This is another hour conversation if you ask me, but I have thoughts. Tara, do you want to go first? You have thoughts?
You go. My thoughts are kind of.
Yeah, I think as a consultant, I oftentimes also have to kind of check myself too, right? When I develop a new workshop or a new service or things that sort, and understand sort of how is this in service to the ultimate goal, which is for me it's not inclusion, it's not equality, it's liberation actually, right? So I'm always thinking like and take it from like an organizational standpoint. We know that everything has to be driven by the mission. My mission is to create liberation for all people, and so when I come up with a new, and all people, not just my people who look like me, but people who I have nothing in common with, right? And so I think that it's really important to always be checking back against that goal, right? So here's this new service, here's this new approach, here's this new article, this new research. How is it contributing to the liberation of all people? And if we're not constantly, every year, if you ask me, at least checking in with ourselves and ensuring that the way in which we do the work is always reaching back to that mission, because the money can be good. These companies, for the most part, are paying big bucks, and so sometimes in a consumer-driven society, the money turns you and it makes you do things differently. And then the other thing I'll say too is that the day that I do consulting in a way that serves or pleases my client and doesn't seek to upset them because I want to keep them, I'm getting out of the business, right? Because I won't center you. I'm centering the liberation of all people. And that means sometimes you're going to be upset with me, because I'm going to be telling you things that you're not going to want to hear. And that's why you hired me. So when I start doing things that go, well, I don't want to piss them off, so I'll use, instead of white supremacy, I'll use the word this. No, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about toxic masculinity. We're talking about white privilege. We're talking about those things. And that's the things that we have. But I'm going to be here to support you through the conversation. So it's always checking back with how and what I'm offering, and how does it connect to my ultimate goal of liberation for all people.
I love that.
I felt that in my heart.
Yeah, I started to cry a little bit saying it, because I felt my eyes water and I was fighting it back for a second.
Like, and it should move us, right? Like
Mhm,
these big
mhm.
things, liberation for all people.
That's right.
Like that should move us.
Yeah.
For me, like it's also about being really clear about my why. And my why is like what we've got right now and the leadership we have right now. We've got a global pandemic. We've got really nice weather in Vancouver, but the creek beds are full of dead salmon because there's
I
no
saw.
water.
Yeah.
Um, climate change is no joke.
Mhm.
The violence of racial injustice, like we've seen that, can't unsee that. So the future that we know we want and that we all need to have so we can survive and thrive, like we need to radically rethink that and we need to make that future irresistible. And that's what I'm here for, whether I'm consulting on a strategy level or I'm working one-on-one with a leader. And Cornell, something that you said, like having the fierce courage to speak the truth. Like I will take a stand for my client. I will take a stand for that future, that irresistible future that we need. I will take a stand for all of our liberation. And I have to take a firm stand and be fierce in that and be willing to be fired.
That's right. That's right. And even in for me saying that too, like I love that I talk about that a lot. There's privilege in that, right? Of being able to say, hey, I'm willing to be fired in order to stand up for what I believe in. So I know that not all people are able to take that, right? And so also being mindful of like because most of us who are doing this work are from marginalized identities. Many of us are people of color too, right? And so recognizing what that means. So I always speak from I statements. So me, that's my take, and that's what I'm willing to do. And last thing I'll say too is I think a lot of times what gets us into this work is often inspired by personal experience based on our personal identities. Yeah. And so I also like to stop often too to go, how am I focused on the liberation of my Asian peers? How am I focused on the liberation of my transgender peers, of people with disabilities? Because I'm not just in this work for Black people and just for queer people. I'm in this work for all of us. And so how am I making sure that what I do is not just centering me, but also centering other folks whose identities I may not hold? And I think that's a critical reflection point for all of us too.
It certainly is. And thank you so much for both being able to stay a little bit longer. Any closing thoughts here? Anything you'd like to point our audience to that you're working on, that you're excited about, or anything else that's coming our way?
The only thing I would say take care of yourself. We didn't even talk about self-care and our own mental health and things of that sort. So for folks who are on this call who do consulting or work in-house or whatever that is, how are we also finding time for self? Because if we don't fill our cup, there's no way we can be sustainable in this work, because we need to take care of ourselves as well.
I'll just echo that, like hydrate. And like it's such a generous community. Thank you for tuning in and sharing your thoughts. When you hang up, I would encourage you to ask yourself, how am I feeling? And what's going on in my body? Take 5 minutes and answer those questions for yourself, and then relook at your plan for today. And if you need to make changes to honor what your lived reality is right now, like be fully empowered to do that.
I love it.
Thank you both so much once again. It has been an absolute pleasure. And I got to say, we've rescheduled, I don't know how many times, but
I think 4.
Like 4.
3. Okay.
But this was great. And,
yes.
I would love to do this again with you both. I love the energy. Thank you both so much. Really, really appreciate it. If you're all out there watching this, then definitely check out what Cornell is up to. Go to bravetrainings.com. And also check out what Tara's doing on tararobertson.ca, or you can follow them both on social media. And if you like this episode, please do give us a like and a share. It would really, really help us out. Until next time, this is Enrico Imanalo with the DEI Is podcast.